T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Midheaven Podcast. Thank you for joining us. My name is Candice Marie. This is my partner in crime,
the Peace Dealer, aka Hermes in the flesh.
How's it going?
A lot.
Yeah.
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 A lot happening very fast. I'm catching up with it, and I'm liking it though. This is for me like a new life. So stepping into it.
Yeah, you're feeling the thick squares again.
Yes.
Well, you got a bit of a break because you're a later degree Taurus rising, but yeah. So the astrology for the rest of the year is gonna be spicy.
Why is it spicy?
Obviously.
Yo, that's the best word for it. I like that.
Especially,
Yeah.
like, you guys saw the last couple episodes we did. We talked about Libra season. We talked about the eclipses. We are going to be doing another eclipse video, so stay tuned. That's going to be coming soon. But we actually wanted to kind of talk a little bit about a transit that's setting up, like, right now as you guys are watching this. It is part of the Mars retrograde, okay?
Series, yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
so it's a factor of the Mars retrograde, but I think it's something that is probably important to look at separate from that. This is the Mars and Gemini square Neptune and Pisces aspect that's setting up. We're going to see the square 3 times over the process of the Mars retrograde. That's between like the 30th of October and the end of January 2023. I don't think we'll look at when each of the squares kind of perfect, but as we're filming this in the end of September, we're already starting to see some of the Mars square Neptune aspects. So we thought it was important to kind of talk about that archetypally and like how that might play out.
True that. And we know Mars takes, 2 years to go through the ZODIAC?
Yep.
Bearing it retrogrades once every 2 years.
Yeah.
So in 2 years from now, 2024 is going to bring the end of Neptune in Pisces.
Yeah.
So we are going to see, by the time Mars comes back, Pisces will be ready to end its transit and relationship with Neptune.
Yeah. Saturn will be there too.
Saturn will be there too.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we're going to have the square with Saturn there, which Geminis, be careful. Prepare yourselves. Okay. I feel like Gemini's kind of gone through it with the Saturn opposition. I feel like Virgos, you need to really be careful. We've seen the Saturn opposition with Leos. We've seen the Saturn opposition with Cancers and Capricorn. I think this is going to be vicious for Virgos with Virgo energy, the society of Virgo. So the first thing I'd wanted to know is by the time Mars comes back around, Saturn's going to be here. So I feel like this chapter, low key, is inadvertently the most important because by the time Saturn comes back around, it's the conclusion, it's the end of the world. It's basically us responding to that conclusion. And I think this is like that home stretch that basically determines how we end everything.
The late degrees also of Pisces, you know? So this is like total like burnout rock starville. The craziest of the crazy things happen here.
Straight up, yeah.
So in 2 years' time, like as Saturn and Neptune, because they're both going to start to kind of ingress into Aries around the same time.
Yeah.
28, 29 degrees of Pisces, the end of the zodiac. So there is something like super karmic that's getting like cycled out, filtered through, wrapping up, and it's going to be really interesting. It'll be the first Saturn-Neptune conjunction that we have seen since the Capricorn conjunction that happened in
the 90s.
In the 90s, yeah, 89 into 1990.
Which we have, actually, which is actually really
That'll
awesome.
be fun. A Saturn square with a Neptune square.
At least it's
I was not aware I signed up for that.
And, you know, it's also amazing. My question for you initially right now is, we know Jupiter is ahead right now in that space. Neptune and Saturn will be. So it's like expanding it in advance. What does that look like as far as a sneak peek? Because basically, we're pioneering and starting something now that we may not be aware when Saturn and Neptune is here is going to fully be the next thing. Or how do you see that?
I'm like so in love with some of the Jupiter transits in recent years, even though when we had Jupiter in Capricorn, it was a shit show. pun intended, because of the conjunction to Pluto. But I think it was interesting to see like Saturn and Jupiter move through Capricorn, and then we saw Saturn and Jupiter also move through Aquarius. And so with each transit, there was a little bit of like that expansion and that contraction. And then obviously then we see Jupiter pull ahead to the next sign. So it's done this in Pisces, pulled ahead of Neptune and went into Aries. And maybe it's to me because I have a lot of cardinal in my chart, but I felt like that was the period where like a lot got initiated. So I was kind of like super vibing out with the fact that, you know, Jupiter and Aries really kind of lit a fire under my ass and like helped me get things done. And for me, it was on an angle. So to see Jupiter go into Aries in preparation, kind of showing us, what the future holds in a couple years. I think Jupiter says like the future is bright, anything is possible. And I like it in Aries because we see a much more active, independent, courageous, self-aware, right? Can be self-righteous.
Self-aware, yeah.
Type of energy. And so I think that's really inspiring individuals to be like, I need to be practicing spiritually, physically, and, you know, emotionally. It's like about like that mind-body balance. So I think a lot of people have gotten more active in their faith, more active in their self-awareness, their defense. There's been a lot of people reading up about the law and laws in regards to their personal rights, their bodies. So we've seen a lot about stuff about self-defense. I think the truth is like in the future, we're really going to see with Saturn and Jupiter in Aries, Saturn and Neptune in Aries, like survival of the fittest, literally or figuratively. You know, you either need to be intelligent or you need to be like very handy or very fit in order to survive in the world and of what's coming.
No, that's very true. At least in some practical means, which will give rise to that Saturn and Aries generation in the 90s that probably bring in new social like movements or individual social movements.
You have like self-governing. There's going to be a lot more self-governing, I think, with Saturn and also Neptune and Aries. I mean, it's going to be a start of a new cycle, so that's going to be interesting. I mean, obviously Saturn, not too thrilled being in the sign of Aries. It's going to be, you know, technically in its detriment. So we see a lot of issues with the physical body, a lot of issues with self-esteem. And I think that with Neptune being there, it's like a dissolving of like old personal images. So I think that the pros are people who are handy, tactical, not afraid to stand up for themselves and also fight. Good, but it's going to be really challenging because there's going to be this narrative or this push to like dissolve anything in regards to our personal identities. So I think of like the continuation of, I'm separate from my family, or I'm separate from my gender, or I'm separate like from all these things. Like you're going to keep seeing this becoming a thing to where there is going to be a push for large masses of people to like give up their personal identity. Yeah.
That is so well said.
And their personal sovereignty too, I think.
Which is that huge fighting point. And I love how you said that because it's, releasing out of changing your beliefs, which now makes a lot of sense why we see a lot more transhumanistic or identity political agendas that really, and even if it's not an agenda, just that message out there to kind of help people see beyond attaching to an identity or encouraging people to basically give their power away in some cases.
Well, Neptune has associations with sacrifice, right?
So, being the martyr as well.
Yeah, being the martyr,
Well, another thing we want to keep in mind, which in tandem with everything you mentioned, really leads into this, is I like to think of Neptune squares like going to the dentist and gaining laughing gas. It's like it has to disassociate you so you don't feel the pain. And I feel like the pain here is Pluto that's leaving Capricorn and going into Aquarius. Pluto leaving Capricorn, going into Aquarius. Last time this happened, colonials in this country were in an uproar with tea parties, rebellions and literal war. So I think this aspect, without this square, what the collective would be going through is so painful. This square will help us disassociate and desensitize while we transition, because all through this square in Mars retrograde, Pluto's going to be going into Aquarius and retrograding back and forth. And what did you feel about that?
I have some very strong feelings about this transit.
Oh,
like this
snap.
transit's been coming up a lot for me to the point
The
where
square.
the square. I've been sitting with it, thinking about it. I mean, I have 0 mutable placements in my natal chart. 0. I have 4 planets in Scorpio, 4 planets in Capricorn, Moon in Aries, Jupiter in Cancer. So I'm all like fixed cardinal. So mutable placements, I don't fucking understand because I'm so black and white. I'm like, no, it's not in between. It's this or it's that. So I've grown to really appreciate in recent years, you know, Neptune in Pisces, Jupiter in Pisces, Saturn when it was in Sagittarius, Jupiter was in Sag. It's been really helpful for me to realize that there is room to kind of change your mind. So I guess before I get into my heated rant about this transit, I like that you can change your mind. This Mercury retrograde in Virgo has really shown me you can change your mind. It's okay to shift things or shift the direction or really get down to like what's important. I'm not wild about the fact that Mars is going to be in a very extended square to Neptune for some time because Mars is going to retrograde back at around 25 degrees. That's when it's going to start its retrograde around the 30th of October. So, you know, 2 weeks-ish to see Mars in a square to Neptune. That's 2 weeks of essentially like driving drunk throughout your life and just not knowing what's going to happen.
Just winging it too.
Yeah, like
hopefully I don't get
and
pulled over.
we're not encouraging that. I have to
With
say that.
a suspended license too.
It's super fucking reckless. Like you're driving drunk in a fucking
and you got warrants out for your arrest.
in a storm, you know? I mean, it's just
oh my God,
and these are stormy placements. Mutable placements are stormy energies.
Yeah.
Pisces, Sagittarius, Gemini, like Virgo, like things are changing and the weather is changing. I mean, we're in the midst of these squares now. We're having really gnarly squares. So
you know what I like about Mars on my sun or sign? Ask me about my dry spell.
oh, so it's I mean, it's gonna improve your sex life.
Oh my goodness.
Careful what you say though, because it's gonna go retrograde.
I've had experiences I didn't even know you can have. I feel like a late bloomer for sure. And it's interesting because I don't know if the Mars transit brought this or it's just a coincidence, but I share a composite Mars connection and the composite Mars is exactly on my sun. And now this Mars in Gemini is, woo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
even
Mars is
outside of-
sex.
Yeah.
You know, libido.
And I've been working out too.
Yeah,
I'm working out every day.
The trines to Saturn are nice as well. I mean,
strengthens it.
coming into the square, like we've said in our previous like episodes, like Libra season, you know, we see Mars and the Sun and Venus all come into a trine with Saturn, which is stabilizing. But like, I view Mars, I view trines and sextiles like you got to put in some work or effort. Like the energy's there, but you got to put it in.
You got to break it in. I like that.
So Saturn is kind of, in support of Mars, but still Mars being like the direction and where we're going, the fire, the motivation, the foot on the gas pedal, and it's square to Neptune, and this is an opening square. I feel like it's going to create more divisiveness. More issues in terms of clarity, so we're going to see more censorship and claiming false news and
lots of fake news,
screwing with you know, social media and changing narratives. We're going to see more talking heads and arguments in the media. And when you talk about disassociating, I think the whole purpose is that they realize that if they get everybody in like this fear zone to where everybody's arguing and fighting about worst case scenario and who we're gonna blame and like getting all up in arms, it's intentional to disrupt the vibration. Yeah. And it's all going to come through Gemini and also Pisces things. So it's gonna be what you're reading in the news, what you're seeing on television, what commercials you're seeing, what you're being prompted to read, or what's being pumped into the algorithm on social media. It's also going to be, are you getting angry and having all this like resentment and stuff coming out, or like not knowing where anger is coming from because you're under the influence? And people who are under substances and stuff and are finally kind of getting agitated and speaking out and saying things that have always been on their mind. Like, it's pretty fucking messy. Mars square Neptune is super messy.
And I like that because, you know, it'll definitely be assertive. Once again, like for any Gemini energies too, I feel like my sexual appetite or activities has been awakened, you know what I mean? And more so the perception I have around it, which I think applies to everyone else as far as like being able to look differently at what you can do and how you can do it. And that square to Mercury especially, I think is, I was gonna say stupid, but like really magical, and really powerful. But one thing you said that I think is so key is the intensification of talking points that's gonna bring to a head this polarity, and polarization. The square to Venus, I think, brought to a head masculine and feminine beef, and I think the trine will kind of, balance it and align it. But like, for example, I don't know if you sent me this, but someone was predicting that there might be difficulty, for example, in Russia, because if we take this whole talking point that started, let's say, for example, Russia and Ukraine, yeah, they were talking points against it. Now you have potentially this draft in Russia that has a lot of people. I think you did send me this.
Yeah.
Right. Like trying to move to Georgia, or
yeah, people trying to like leave
the country.
Leave the country,
which
yeah.
makes it so much more divisive in every single area of your life, and having to really talk on this because action is inducing this instead of it just being an idea. Now, how are you going to act off on this idea, and how is that going to really like change the way people look at you and everything? So
this is the first full Mars retrograde in Gemini since we've had in the 40s. And I'm still doing like my research because I'm going to do a video on this, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I have a feeling this cycle coordinates very strongly with what was going on with like a lot of wartime propaganda back
you
then.
said the 40s.
Yeah,
World
so
War II,
I'm pretty sure there was something like that going on then, where there was a lot of propaganda. That Mars retrograde was in Gemini. I don't know what it was aspecting, so I'm not going to talk on it, but just, Mars themes, war, conflict, fighting, soldiers, right? And anything in regards to like weapons.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Pluto in Cancer or Leo? So
I think it was in Cancer, yeah.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, so, and when planets go retrograde, especially like planets like Venus, Mercury, Mars, they're closer, to the sun. Therefore, they're also closer to Earth. Mm-hmm. So when they retrograde, we feel the effects of that more so than outer planet retrogrades. Like when outer planets retrograde, it'll take a period of time for that retrograde to kind of like really marinate and sink in, and then it goes direct, and then we see huge global changes.
Right.
So personal planets like Mercury, Venus, Mars, yeah, we're going to feel it. I mean, Mars retrograde in Gemini, it bites back. There's going to be road rage. We're going to see, keyboard warriors alive and well. But I feel like this is intentionally being fueled. And like in the back of my mind, I'm like, fucking Facebook. Like I'm just waiting for some shit to go on with Facebook where we find out that there's just intentionally more stuff being pumped onto certain platforms or to certain people's profiles, depending on their political affiliation, their gender, their age, whatever. That ends up, affecting elections. This is going to be going on during the election phase.
Which I think is one of the most remarkable parts of this, which echoes a lot of what you said in previous videos in this video. It's interesting how, wow, Mars goes direct, and we have the midterm elections, then it goes retrograde. I don't know why, to me, that feels like, promise this, promise that, we lied, got you, bitch. So it's like, or it's just like, even if they keep the promises they keep aren't what we expected it to look like, for better or for worse. It doesn't have to be a bad thing, but I think that's just really interesting how that retrograde restructures the effects of the midterm election winners. And I think it's so significant. I think the sleeper hit and the most significant point you brought up in this talk so far, indirectly, is Mars being in Gemini in the 40s. Because I didn't realize the Pluto opposition is literally domino affecting the completion of the effects of what World War II is happening right now.
Yeah.
And how that's going to crescendo back into a World War III. So that's
something that came up
4 and 5
for me was like a lot of like, is it your fight to fight?
Right.
And this isn't me being insensitive, but like the war that's going on in Ukraine, it's very much fabricated. There is a driving force for something else to create conflict. There's a reason why this is happening.
It's just like in the Middle East, you have people who are in the middle of two other people's agendas, and they're using and exploiting what those people are going to have sympathy for you to support, and it's like ugly.
Well, and I think that what prompted us to even want to do this video today, we weren't even going to do this. I was like, we should do this, was reading the news and hearing how come, the end of September, parts of the EU are basically alluding to the fact that it's very likely that somebody has been tampering with the gas lines that are going from Russia to Europe that are supplying Europe with gas as we're coming into the fall and then soon to be the winter. So this is just coming out like the last 48 hours. And I'm like, man, this Mars square Neptune is going to be some shady fucking shit. It's going to be gas wars.
It's going to be gas wars.
And, I mean, I don't know. I go back and forth. Like gas could be Neptune. It could be Uranus. I think it's Neptune, right? Not gases?
I think gas would be Neptune. I see why you say Uranus. It could be too, but I would think it's Neptune, to be honest.
So, we've got Mars, which is where things are going, where things are flowing, right? And then we've got the square to Neptune. Mars is war. I think we're going to see hacking.
Yeah.
I think we're going to see fucking with gas lines. I think we're also going to see a lot of people who are like, I didn't do anything, and they're just, deflecting. Multiple different narratives coming out. I am 100% sure that we have not heard the end of a lot of talking points in relation to COVID or the jabs, because Mars being needles, Neptune also being anything in regards to viruses. Which is interesting as they're getting ready to start pushing like all these like new boosters and stuff to see like whether or not people take it. Mars retrograde just in general with a square to Neptune makes me feel like a lot of people are going to be like, I don't know about that. And they're still saying they need 2 years of trials for boosters, but they're going to give them out anyway. So that's interesting. And we're going to see just like the dynamic in regards to the war or the direction or the narrative change. And when I see Mars square Neptune, that's some shady shit. That's like basically being like, yeah, we're going to cease fire. Like we want peace. And then like all of a sudden they blow up like a Navy ship. That's the kind of stuff that you'll see happen. Like I've seen more car bombing happen with Mars in Gemini than most other cycles from what I've noticed. I've also seen more carjacking. I've also seen more neighborhood riots. Yeah. So there's just going to be like more of this going on. And I think that as they're pumping stuff into the media, they're going to be manipulating and trying to kind of stir the pot and getting people angry. And like, call me a conspiracy theorist, but the fact that this is happening right before the midterms makes me feel like there's going to be extreme weather in some places, there's going to be fear of viruses in some places, or there is going to be organized crime or other things going on in other places, really creating like fear of people going out and using their fingers to push on screens and vote. Mars square Neptune.
Someone might get killed by the cops. They might be black or Asian, who knows?
Well, you see a lot of issues with discrimination when you have aspects like squares or oppositions to Neptune. I mean, we have seen major Neptune transits that coincide with genocide. I mean, look what's going on in the Middle East right now, where they're telling people that Iranians and people in the Middle East are fighting for their political rights. They're not. It's women who are asking not to be beaten and raped and abused while they're in prison, asking for equality and the ability to dress how they want or be able to have rights to their children. So a lot of people don't know that. You're just hearing, oh, they're just, rioting again, or they're doing this, or they're doing that. I've seen stuff.
Iran.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There, we have seen protests also that are still going on in parts of Europe. We're seeing protests that are also going on still in parts of Australia. And the narrative is changing.
And a lot of that narrative with Neptune, like once Neptune and Saturn go into Aries, all established religion that has influenced the world over 200 years is dead. Like that's
the Catholic Church knows what's up. They're like they're just like hoarding everything and getting ready to just
it's
just
done.
jump in the hatch and hide out.
Which is amazing to be alive for, you know what I mean? Like
I feel like they're probably, I haven't looked into this. I'm making the assumption, but like the Catholic Church probably knows like the jig is up, so I would assume they're like moving like all of their like most valuable things and pieces. Don't they own like more real estate than just about anybody on the planet? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's like the biggest fucking scam ever, is the Catholic Church.
No, it is. And down to Protestants rebelling and the Islamic revolutions, like there's a responsibility all religions kind of tie in together, and that also represents the old generation that's dead. Like, I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it. A lot of people from the old generation who facilitated that, they're dead or they're dying. So like the new generation isn't bringing that, and we're gonna see this reflected. I think what's very important that Candace said in that there's gonna be deception is we don't have any Sagittarius. We don't have any Virgo other than Mercury that's going to leave. So to give you an insight, Gemini answers the question, what? It is the experimentation of really looking at variables and seeing what things are. Virgo provides analysis and answers the question, how? And this is what puts what information is putting out there in check to fact check. And then, of course, Sagittarius answers what it means. If Gemini is the word in the dictionary, Sagittarius is what the word means. And this takes the facts of Virgo and it shows you how to synthesize the meaning of those facts. And Pisces answers the question, why? Which gives this completion of reasoning. So we have Pisces, which are beliefs, and we have Gemini, which are individual ideas, but we don't have Sag and Virgo to put it in check. So everyone's just going to be explaining and expressing how they truly believe what's happening is happening, and it's probably not accurate at all. And that's something to keep in mind. And the next thing that I wanted to really establish is, like Candace also said earlier, Mars is the god of war. And I think the most important part of this transit, this might actually kick off World War III.
Yeah.
This might probably
We're gonna see
do it.
We're gonna see, I think, the third square that's gonna take place in like February.
So
March,
after it goes
March.
retrograde and goes through, okay.
It'll be the third square.
I believe that, and Pluto will be in Aquarius by then. I believe, You heard her say it first. I think I had chills. I think
or civil war. I mean, I don't like saying that.
I think both.
You know, but I mean, I think just you guys have to understand that we've got major heavy hitter planets at the tail end of signs here. Okay, so we're dealing with Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. That is those in charge who are dictating the masses and determine who is going to, basically be shunned out of society. If you look at what's happened the last couple of years, it's been a slow, steady process, systematically, basically turning the masses against each other if we're not following the narrative. In preparation, I think, to also get a lot of people used to just being isolated and being alone. We'll see even more of this as Saturn goes into Pisces. It's going to be like a darkening phase.
Yep.
So, I think like across the board, it's funny what you bring out about religion. I mean, this is like a very Mars square Neptune like comment, but it's like, I'm not for organized religion, personally. That's just me. But I think that people should be able to practice what they believe in. So like I would definitely vote or fight or support people who want to have their ability or their freedoms to, practice their faith, right? Mm-hmm. And so Mars square Neptune is very much like, I'll fight for that. Like, I'll fight for your ability to like believe in what you believe in. But not if you're like sacrificing fucking children or like, you have a cult or, you're doing things that are like a little like suspicious. So
or because of your beliefs, it fucks your children up. And that's a way of sacrificing your children.
Yeah, so if you look at it under like that perspective, I feel like Mars is what you're fighting for or what you're debating or what your talking points are. With the square to Neptune, there can be a lot of people being like, these are my actions, and it's justified blindly because of my faith. And
it works both ways.
Yeah.
And this is where, like, in the collective sense, everyone's kind of connected. We can take the whole controversial anti-vax issue. This will bring both cases where you have a parent who's, like, totally anti-vax and does not vaccinate their children, maybe in ways that work or in irresponsible ways that fuck that kid up. Versus another case where you have, a parent advocating for how, in a rare case, a vaccine fucked their kid up and how they're having alternative methods to help. Both have different views on vaccines, but there's a way that there's irresponsible it can work out versus there's a way that it can work out, even though they both disagree. And this is where there could be common ground. But once again, coming back around to the fact that this retrograde is going to change the way we think about war, personally, I think what this marks is also a quintessential redefinition on the way war is waged back in the day with Pluto in Cancer and Pluto in Aries, where war would devastate millions of people. I think now this new age of war is not that much people fight. Now there's internet. So now with the Neptune square to Mars, unlike before with the propaganda of newspapers, broadcasters have to put information out knowing that the people they're waging war against are watching it, and it has to be deceptive. It has to be misleading, kind of. And also, it can be decided so much quicker because we have all this extra technology. So I think if you're expecting a World War II, it's not going to be anything like World War II with gas masks and artillery and guns, because there's drone strikes, there's cryptocurrency, you know what I'm saying? There's internet. So like, we may be on the precipice of experiencing something we've never seen, and we may not even know it's already happening because we're expecting a more traditional look of how war is supposed to look.
We're also going to see Mars in its square. So the square, I mean, we're starting to feel it now, but it's not going to perfect and for the first time until right around October 10th through like the 15th.
Wow.
But in its process before it goes retrograde, it's going to inconjunct or quincunx Pluto.
Yeah.
Which you have that inconjunct natally, the Gemini to
Pluto to Saturn
to Capricorn.
Yeah. With the Mars is the, oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah, just like an inconjunct between Gemini and Capricorn, where Gemini is just chatty, relating information, kind of switching things up, kind of pivoting, and I could see Capricorn checking Gemini and being like, get real, get together, be on time.
That's
like,
my life.
Think about the long term. And so...
Have you ever seen that meme where like, so the Moon, Saturn, and my Sun, Moon, Saturn, and Cap versus Sun and Gemini is the relationship with a magician who does tricks, and then the person on the side reveals how the trick was done and screws up the magician, like, hi, I did a trick, and then the Capricorn's like, this is what he did, and it's like, what the fuck? And it's just kind of like, you know, but I didn't realize I also have Mars in Aries and Pluto in Scorpio, so it's like that quincunx too.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like shifting.
I feel like it's going to be about government and authority figures that are actually checking the media and being like, no, don't show this, show that. Or like, no, pump this theory or pump this story, you know, instead of that. And
would you say that more being exposed, like with the Twitter article?
Possibly more through the retrograde, yeah.
The retrograde.
I mean, I think it's going to take until Sag season until we start seeing the oppositions to Mars and the square to Neptune. That Sag season is going to come forward and be like, look, what's going on, you fucking idiots.
Yeah.
Like, this is what's been happening, and this is what you're feeding into. And we don't really start to see the grand reveal until, like, next year. But
very true.
Mars also being in Gemini makes me think of, like, where we're going to have issues with vehicles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Now that you mentioned vehicles, do you think this may be a great push to like push in electric vehicles?
Well, if there's issues with gas, I mean, I've called this gas wars, Mars square Neptune, gas wars.
Yeah.
So I think that if there isn't one crisis relating to gas, there's going to be another. So I wonder if this is going to be like a, you know, rationing of gas or metals or certain things relating to Mars, and they may say, oh, there's shortages, so we can't get new cars out, or we can't get the parts that we need for like gas run vehicles, so there's going to be a push to have like electric vehicles. I also think a lot of people are going to be pivoting and reworking like where they're moving to, because the third house deals with movement. So a lot of people are going to be like, I was going to move there, and now they're like, never mind. And Gemini is youth, or like elementary schools, younger kids. And so I think with like Mars square Neptune, I'm hoping that as a result of this retrograde and finally it going direct, we start to really see some real true facts and legitimate information about how some of the most recent mandates are actually affecting children, especially their mental development, their communicative skills. Hopefully we're not delaying having kids going back to school. I mean, I feel really sad for a lot of the younger kids over the last few years who have missed out on the opportunity to like socialize and like be around other kids and have the experience of like, you know, going to like kindergarten through, you know, the first couple of years of school.
Right.
And where that has really affected their ability to like communicate. And maybe we're going to see like a lot of it kids, we're starting to realize like are having issues in terms of just learning disabilities that might start coming out.
Social development disorders.
Yeah.
Right. That's phenomenal, because a lot of these kids will be born a lot of these kids born from like Capricorn to Gemini will be born without social energy.
Yeah.
I'm such a kid born in 1990. It's rare, but like since the 90s, there's still been Pluto Scorpio, like prominent social energy. These kids will have none.
Yeah.
So, I mean, these are probably kids that are going to be in virtual reality, you know?
Yeah.
Or like in a whole new
They won't
level.
know any better, you know? Yeah. And it's just, you know, it's important. I mean, the fact that we're coming into eclipses, you know that the eclipse that we're going to have at the end of October, it's a Scorpio eclipse. It'll be ruled by Mars, and Mars will be stationing at the time of the eclipse because it'll only be about 5 or 6 days later that Mars will retrograde. So it's going to be really strong. So I think that the positive, because I want to see the positive in this, is, you know, we're going to see some trines throughout these squares from planets in Libra, which is about socializing. And I see like Sun and Venus in a trine to Mars and a trine to Saturn. Like, are people saying like, hey, we got to work together? Like, instead of playing into the divisiveness, we got to work together and find ways to be able to kind of communicate and find the way forward. Because anything after like the first half of October, the astrology really kind of goes to shit, unfortunately.
Here's my prediction. Here's my final prediction. I had assumed that what I'm going to predict was going to happen 3 years from now, like anywhere from 1.5 to 3 years from now. But after everything you said, I believe now that, because this, what really blows my mind is the Grand Air Trine, the building Grand Air Trine with Mars direct, building off of Saturn, pushing Libra, that's going to square Pluto.
Yeah.
So it's like a social revolution or realization, and I think that square to Pluto is going to unexpectedly trigger war and nuclear options. And then the retrograde is the war, and then the direct is the aftermath and maybe different skirmishes or whatnot.
You're going to see Sun and Venus in Libra square Pluto at the same time. Yeah, and that's important because Venus is the ruler of the North Node. So there is definitely going to be a push for peace, negotiations, harmony. Let's back down. But then I think that
the retrograde will probably overturn that.
You're
and
going
then
to
the direct
see,
will be, oh, I like that better. That's so much better.
because when it retrogrades and it hits the square again, it's going to square at 22. So where the first square was at 23, which is more about like chaos and the masses and lots of people, Mars square Neptune is going to be, I think, about how like governing powers are, you know, dealing with all of this stuff and making decisions about, you know, how they contain something or they contain a narrative or like groups of people. And then we're going to see when planets go into Sag, they're going to start coming into an opposition with Mars. So that's really going to start.
So you're saying going into the direct, coming out of Libra of balance and peace, let's push for peace. Let's work on our image.
And then the eclipse is like, fuck peace.
Right after the midterm elections, like after you voted for us and we got your trust, all right, fuck peace. Then we're going to do our real moves. This triggers tensions.
Yeah.
People prepare for war. Mars direct, war. Boom.
I'm curious to see what Sag season brings because I feel like all those planets in Sagittarius at the highest point are going to be the high truth, the real bigger picture, what's really going on in a global scheme. And it's going to be squaring both Jupiter and Neptune. So I feel like from the 29th of November, where we see Mercury opposed, then Venus opposed, then the Sun opposed, and that's all going to also square Neptune. It's almost like we're starting to realize that the same divisiveness and problems and conflicts that's going on in our communities are also going on globally. So I mean, as Americans, I have to tell you, like I hear from a lot of people all over the world, we don't see half the shit that's going on in other countries. We don't. We're not seeing the protests in Europe. We didn't hear a lot about the farmers. We have to go looking for this information.
Wow.
So, you know, maybe globally, like the masses, we're going to start hearing about like what's going on more in early December with the oppositions to Mars, which is retrograde. We have to realize like, oh shit, I got really angry about this story that I heard, or I got all riled up about the war, when in reality, like actually this is what's going on. So media is going to be really entertaining in December throughout this transit.
We're also seeing the end of the media as we know it. You just may not know it.
Well, I mean, they're literally like grasping at straws right now, trying to figure out the next big thing. And I'm going to tell you guys, with mutable squares, it's storms. It's storms, shifts that are going on with travel, things that are going to be changing with health. Those are like the big things, because mutable squares represent changing our minds or changing the narrative.
Can you fly into Florida right now?
Can I physically fly? I've had a few drinks. I don't
No,
think I
but
should fly to Florida right now.
No, but like, can anyone book a ticket to Tampa right now? Or you probably can't.
We could try. I bet they would be cheap.
So, but like pilots would fly into
Well,
Tampa.
I feel like they're obvious. I mean, I'm sure a lot of things around that area are grounded. Probably on the coast where stuff is hitting. I don't know.
So
I
like
would
the
assume,
flights are canceled and all that.
Yeah,
I would think, right?
I would assume.
That would be crazy if they're risking it. Like, hey, you got this cheap ticket, but
if you have a ninth house stellium and you need to go to, you want to go to Florida for cheap, now's the time. It's really good at hurricane parties.
Yo. It's turbulence.
So Mars will station at the end of January at 8 degrees. Well, not really quite the end, huh? Right around here, like the 12th. At 8, it'll hang out at 8 for a while. Then it'll start coming forward. And then the last square that we're going to see between Mars and Neptune is going to be right around here. Early March. And it's when the sun is there. So the sun's with Neptune, Mercury's with Neptune, in a square to Mars, and Mars is in the superior position. So
Saturn's in the Pisces and Pluto's getting ready to go in Aqua. That's it right there. That's the beginning of the end of the world, guys.
Also, I think we're going to hear a lot more, I didn't really touch on this, but I'll do it quickly, about people who are seeking asylum in other countries, who are trying to leave because of like acts of war or like religious, like whatever, like religious issues. Like I think you're going to see a lot of people that are going to try to escape their countries because of religious persecution. And I think we're also going to hear a lot of like not criminals, but like people who are being held hostage in war situations. And maybe whatever has been kind of like brewing that we have like heard that's going on in the background, we're going to realize like there was like a bigger scandal. Like there's still some more bullshit coming out mid-March. When you see Mercury, the Sun, and Neptune all in Pisces square Mars, we don't have Neptune receiving those trines from Mars anymore, and we're also getting ready to see the nodes come into a square with Pluto, and Pluto's about to go into Aquarius. So likely we're going to find out in the spring of next year that everything that's been going on with the lockdowns, the supply chain issues, the mandates, all of this has been a part of a narrative to control the masses, because they're getting ready to have some new way of ruling or having control. I mean,
okay, so just to make sure you know, everything she said is on point.
I don't like saying that, but it's like we're going to be like, oh, this was all 3 years of like a testing ground just to see if we comply.
Literally.
Yeah.
That was the beta test. And I like how she said control, because when you think about collective control, that is Saturn in Pisces. That is Saturn in Aqua, Capricorn, and Pisces. And we're literally coming to the end of a world control that will lead us into a new world order with Neptune of the Illuminati.
And then there'll be new surveillances.
Yeah.
With Pluto and Aquarius.
Yeah, I think despite the negativity around it, I think it's going to be positive at first, especially advanced technology, greater freedom, and then of course, those who kind of see through the real game behind it might have an advantage, but we at this point don't know what that's going to look like, because there's so much that's going to change. So, it's been nice knowing y'all, but we'll already see y'all on the other side. Make sure you join level 3, where the world is.
In case the world's melting down and you have a question.
It is what it is. We got you over here.
I mean, this is going to be going on, like I said, for several months. So we'll touch on this in other episodes as we talk about like Scorpio season and Sag season and so forth.
Yeah.
But yeah, let us know. Are you being affected by the square? Do you have any planets that are anywhere between like 22 and 27 degrees of the mutable sign, specifically Pisces or Gemini? What do you think? What are your conspiracies? We'd love to hear. Leave us your comments below. Otherwise, thank you guys for supporting the channel, for watching our content. We appreciate it. We'll see you soon.